Welcome to the Brian Buffini Show, where we explore the mindsets, motivation, and methodologies of success. Here's your coach, Brian Buffini.
Well, the top of the morning to you. Welcome to the Brian Buffini Show. You know, we've had an awful lot of famous people on this program, whether it be Matt McConaughey or Magic Johnson or Jay Leno's and all of these folks. But today was one for me. This gentleman is someone I've been wanting to meet for a very long time. He's got a phenomenal story, a heartbreaking story, a hard story to hear, and one of it's the real Shawshank Redemption, in my opinion. And it's a story of redemption. Chris Herren is our guest, and Chris was a basketball phenom from Fall River, Massachusetts, where people have better Irish accents than I do. He was a high school superstar, McDonald's All-American, started out in Boston College, went to Fresno State and played for Jerry Tarkanian, struggled with drugs throughout his career and in college, and then eventually went on to become a big-time pro, taken by the Denver Nuggets in 1999 and eventually traded to his hometown team. And I know what it's like to go home. It can be a very difficult thing. Chris is going to walk through his journey of addiction and where he got to and what the lows were and what that looks like. He's been sober now for, thank God, over 13 years, and he shares his story with making a goal of positive difference from people's lives. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of clips and little videos of him speaking to kids all over, and he's done a phenomenal job, and really a great human being who's doing great things with his life. Chris Herren, welcome to the show. We are honored to have you today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's one of the best intros I've had, and and I mean it.
Well, I appreciate it. It's heartfelt. You know, I first got exposed to you. Actually, it was at a game you played against SMU. My son became a football player years later, but I had friends down at SMU, and it was a game where they were coming out. The kids were after you. They knew of your problems, and they were torturing you. I later saw that on this 30 for 30. I think 30 for 30 documentaries on ESPN is some of the best storytelling done today. They did a show on your life called Unguarded, and it's a phenomenal story. But I watched you from that point on, and you know, I as an Irish guy, the underdog, the undersized guy, you were my guy. And you battled and failed and came back out the other side. And I think, to be honest with you, Chris, that's a story that people can relate to. You know, it's hard to relate to. Magic Johnson, one of those beautiful human beings I ever met in my life, but he's the 6'9" point guard that's, you know, not that he hasn't had struggles, but it's in his struggles that people actually identify with. But I think, you know, I'd love to hear your story. Take us back to what it was like growing up in Fall River, Massachusetts.
You know, Fall River is, you know, it's an old mill town, textile industry. You know, it was vibrant at one time, and you know, the textile industry moved overseas and the mills shut down. It's a tough town. It really is. It's a blue collar town. It's very diverse, you know, and you know, growing up, the one thing we had was Durfee Sports, which is, you know, the local high school. You know, I tell people all the time, Durfee basketball to me was bigger than the Boston Celtics, right? Because I could show up and watch it, and I felt it, and you know, so watching my brother go through that process and wanting that for my life, you know, basically most of my childhood was spent, you know, either aiming for that or playing in the middle of it.
Right. So it's your purpose, it's your focus, it's acknowledgement. High school basketball in those days, it wasn't prep school and AAU ball. It was the biggest thing in the world. The best players played high school ball. And in a town like Fall River, the place is packed to the rafters, and you guys are the biggest game in town.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, we had season ticket holders for high school. People, caravans of buses would travel to follow us to games. Um, a good 3, 4, 5,000 people, and
That's great.
it was definitely the biggest show in town. And you know, in hindsight, it was a lot to shoulder too.
Hmm.
At 14,
Yeah.
at 15 years old. But it made me who I am today. 100%. It's part of my journey. Um, that tough, that grittiness, that resilience that I had to embrace as a child.
Hmm.
Is applicable today in my recovery.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have 6 kids, and they're all sports, and I married an Olympic volleyball player, and so we've been around the sports world for a long time. And it's interesting, with the Instagram world and everything else these kids are dealing with. They all want to be famous, right?
Mm.
And for the people who actually get to be famous, it's not all it's cracked up to be. And like you said, here you are, 14, 15 years of age. You're the center of the community. It's kind of like this guy's never going to buy a beer another day in his life, and everything's good. And, it's a lot. And then, of course, you go to Boston College, which, at the time, people don't realize, it's very provincial stuff, for you to go away, like a lot of pressure. I remember when I first came to America, people in Ireland, people in Dublin, he's forgotten us, he's off, he's doing his own thing. You go to Boston College, you detail in there how, you're doing your thing, you're pursuing your dream, you're doing great. And then one day, there's a couple of persistent people, as it happens on college sometimes, they start offering you cocaine, and you fought them initially, and then you didn't.
Yeah, and I don't want to say I fell in love with it, but what cocaine was for me at 18 years old, it was kind of like my truth serum. Um, it gave me the ability to communicate with others how I felt internally,
Hmm.
and would never say it sober.
Right.
Um, so it was many long nights of sitting there drinking beers, sucking on cigarettes, and doing lines of cocaine, and saying, this is how I felt, as a child,
Right.
and talk, and rehashing old memories. So it was, sadly, it was therapeutic.
Sure.
Odd, oddly enough.
No, and this is brilliant. Like, this is brilliant stuff, because the deal is, when you roll up your sleeves and get dirty on this stuff, and the reason I wanted you today is, coming out of COVID, coming out of these stressful times, and what's going on in the media and the political culture and the war and all the different stuff. One of the things I heard you say that stopped me in my tracks was that you're a person who's designed to seek comfort.
Mm.
And in our world today, that's all I see with people. And we can see the evidences of whether it's drinking, drugs, Netflix, pornography, food. People are seeking comfort in degrees and ways that they never have. And like, here you are. I think it's great. Like, you talk to kids and you talk to all these different people, but there's a reason. There's a beneficial reason why people do these things.
Mm.
Right? There's a beneficial and for you, like everybody, oh my God, cocaine, right? That's the devil's tool. Da, 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 da. But like I say, you sought comfort, and you got comfort initially from the drug. It was your truth serum. It helped you process feelings, which, back then that wasn't probably
100%.
a cool thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and now we're dealing with a culture of people who are seeking comfort. And the problem is that comfort sometimes comes back to haunt you.
It does, and it did.
Hmm.
But I, I, and this just kind of came about, right? I'm 13 years sober, and it just hit me one day that I was wired to seek relief.
Mm.
Like, I just remember being a child and not wanting to be me.
Mm.
I always wanted to kind of get out of myself. I've always looking for something different. Um, and then as I got older, um, I realized what I was seeking was relief, and that relief came in unfortunately, forms that were harmful, and like you said, eventually, um, the relief you're seeking, never you get no relief, and unfortunately, it multiplies the problem.
Right. One of the things we all deal with in trying to grow ourselves and develop is we have these persistent patterns or problems. And we have seasons where we break out. You had you initially get into these problems in Boston College. Jerry Tarkanian, who was an innovative guy, gives you this new chance at Fresno State. You transfer to Fresno State and you become Chris Herren, the basketball legend again. Right? And your career was revitalized. So you're back on goals. Was there a season at Fresno where you didn't seek the comfort of the drugs, or was it just you were in it the whole time, but you had a new lease on life with the sport?
No, I was dialed in. I mean, if you look at it's and even my kids, can tell. If you look at basketball cards or basketball pictures of me from sophomore year to senior year, my body is completely different. I have a completely different body type. I was plugged in, dialed in, 100% committed the year I redshirted and my sophomore year. And the numbers, the numbers prove it. It was my most successful year in college. And then, the old habit started creeping in.
How did you do it? How did you got a new lease on life? How did you make the change? Was it just grin and bear it and
a little bit of that, but I had so Danny Tarkanian, Coach Tarkanian's son, and a guy by the name of John Welch, who's been an NBA coach now for 20 years. John Welch really kind of embraced me and said, "You're going to follow me, and I'm going to teach you how to do this. Not only basketball, but recovery." And so I had a mentor. That I bought into. And I still remember the day when I started pulling away from him and kind of the look in his eyes, that he knew that he was losing me. And that was a transition, and it happened over time. But, at 19 years old, I didn't think cocaine would follow me. I thought that I could move 3,000 miles away and I'll never bump into it again. But the reality is, I didn't have to bump into it. I was seeking it, and that unfortunately, happened to me in my junior year at Fresno State.
So now we fast forward, you graduate, and in the marketplace, the truth of the matter is the marketplace doesn't really care, right? It's what your performance is. All these stories on ESPN, they're not really chronicling. There was a show on last night about the Miracle Mets I was watching. And here was Darryl Strawberry, and he was dealing with his stuff, and he was physically beating his wife at the time. And but they didn't care because the market didn't care because he was delivering home runs and they won a World Series. His wife's in the parade with a black eye. And it's like there's this dynamic, and it took him to come all the way full circle. His story, for him to turn his life around radically and change his life and what he's doing today. But the marketplace, it's like sometimes what I deal with is people who seek comfort in work. And, and you grind and grind and grind and grind. You get acknowledged for that. You get rewarded for that. You get rich doing that sometimes. And the marketplace will reward you. So you got rewarded by the marketplace by getting drafted in the NBA. And great, what would you do? Let's make a young guy with a drug problem a multimillionaire, right? Let's give him a bunch of money, and let's not ask him about his personal life. That's usually a recipe for success, isn't it?
Yeah, and for me, it was, there was always another mountain to climb, and by the time I got there, I was just tired. I was tired of climbing mountains, right? It was just, I remember being a boy and the mountain to climb was to be my brother. And then, and the mountain to climb was to score 2,000 points, not 1,000 in high school.
Right.
And then it was to get a Division I scholarship and then perform at a high level on ESPN and all these mountains. And then I just got tired of the mountain. I got
Mm.
tired of climbing, and my addiction had chased me down. And it was it's tough. It was tough to manage, right? Here I am, this local kid, right? It was like a fairy tale. Like, I am a Celtic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have pictures of being on that floor with my dad.
Mm.
And I have this nightmare that I'm living internally. And I'm saying to myself every day, when when is the secret? When is the story going to break?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, this is not sustainable. And it's just one mistake, one wrong move, and you know, everyone's going to be made aware of who I really am. And it's tough to live that way.
Do you think, looking back on it now, subconsciously you were kind of hoping to get
Oh,
found out?
eventually.
You were hoping to get exposed so that it would kind of make the decision for you?
It's a lot of work, right? And
Mm.
it's a lot of work keeping that secret.
Mm.
And there's multiple motives involved, right? Like, you're making money, you're working, you're professional, but really, you just don't want to hurt. You just don't want to hurt people who care
Mm-hmm.
about you and love you.
Mm-hmm.
And what you don't realize is, that pain is just multiplying, and you know, it just became dreadful. I mean, I remember leaving practice every day to drive to go pick up, and then I'd drive 90 miles an hour down the highway to go meet him, and then turn around and come back and walk into my apartment to be a dad and a husband.
Mm.
And um, it wasn't sustainable. It was painful. Um, it wasn't a life that anybody I would wish on anybody.
But at the time, you're with the Boston Celtics, man. You're a local
Mm,
kid. You're everyone from the outside. You're living a dream.
totally.
Inside, you're living a nightmare. When
Mm.
did it all start to hit rock bottom for you? When was it to the point that it was like, hey, this is the point of no return?
Every day,
Mm.
honest to God,
Mm.
right? And I think, and I tell people in the space that I'm in today, um, I believe the word rock bottom has killed a lot of people.
Mm.
Um, I believe it's prevented a lot of families from doing the right thing and intervening much
Mm.
earlier.
Mm.
I think a lot of families, sit back and watch the trauma build and build and build, and then say, now you're going to have to sift through 15 years of trauma and drug addiction and get healthy from it. And for some, that's an insurmountable, you know,
Right.
uh, and so every day I woke up was a bad day.
Mm.
I never had a good one. It didn't feel right when I was traded. It didn't feel right when I stepped on that floor, because there was a whole nother story to it that nobody knew yet.
Mm.
And, I had to pretend like this is the dream come true.
Right.
And it was a nightmare.
And you're doing interviews and you're doing press and you're,
Oh
you're a
God, yeah.
celebrity, and then so that all it ended up coming to a halt in Boston. Did they ever address the drug issue with you?
No.
No.
Um, the NBA did initially, right?
Okay.
It was, we're going to put you in some type of uh, substance transitional program, and I was subjected to drug testing. Um, but again, right? I was margin. I mean, I wasn't the guy, right? If When a coach looks down the bench and you fall from 10 to 15,
Mm-hmm.
you really, you know, you're very replaceable.
Right.
There's a lot of people in this country that want to be 10 through 15.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a lot of people that aren't qualified to be, 1 through 10. But a lot of people can sit in those seats. And, I really, by the time I got to the Celtics, my behavior, my body, my commitment, my work ethic, it was gone, right?
Mm.
Because I would be in a 2.5 hour practice with Rick Pitino, and I'm already running to the locker room during practice to shoot a text to my drug dealer to say, I'll be out of practice in 25 minutes. I'll be on the highway. Can you start heading out now? So my head was nowhere near, the game.
Wow. Wow. So they release you. You end up going to Europe, and same pattern again.
Oh gosh, Europe was brutal, right? I mean, it was, like, heroin and cocaine, and that's, the language barrier. I mean, I've done drugs, in every country I played in, right? So, probably the most unique was Iran, right? To be in the streets of Tehran, Iran,
Wow. Wow.
running around,
Risking
and
death.
risking death, and having alcohol and cocaine and heroin delivered at all hours of the night.
Wow.
Was definitely a unique. It was a unique story out there.
Yeah, that's kind of resourceful. And I think in terms of this, you look at it and you go through this process and how it's difficult, right? It's challenging. It becomes a spiral. How in God's green earth did how did you end up not being a statistic? How did you end up turning it around?
I was near death. And I say this often, like, I chased death for that feeling for a long time. Every day I took a chance of dying. And you can't deny that. Someone who is shooting heroin, snorting heroin, every day you wake up and you're going to take a chance at losing your life. And I did that for a long time. So unbelievably blessed to be sitting here. To just have one day sober instead of 13 years, right? It's a blessing and a miracle. But I had a guy who said to me that I should play dead for my family. That after my last overdose, he said, why don't you just sit down with your wife and have her explain to the kids that you died in a car accident and let them bury you mentally and emotionally. And when you get out of here, you're going to head west and you're just going to disappear. And when that man told me that my children were better off without me, and my wife will find someone better than me, and they'll finally, hopefully one day, have the dad that they deserve. I said that many nights going to bed to myself. But when I heard it out loud for the first time, it just hit. It really hit me. It hit me right where I needed to be hit. And I said from that day forward, I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to act like everything's good. I'm going at this full speed, gritty, whatever it took. And I've been sober since. And that man is a very special man. And there's not a counselor in this country that will tell you to use that.
Right.
It goes against all.
Yeah.
But that day he reached for something and he found it, and he found it in me. And that's why.
It's what you needed. What were the structural things to help you get back your sobriety? What were the things you did that really did help you? Obviously you had to make a decision, and there was, you had to make a decision.
Time, man. Like, time matters in this. Like, I'm sitting here at my wellness center, and people who put more time into this early on, their chances of staying sober longer are much greater. Right. And I was very fortunate that I had people in my life, Chris Mullen and his wife, Liz, who found me a place and sent me away. And
how long did you go away for initially?
11 months.
Wow.
11 months. And I had a newborn baby. My son was 9 and my daughter was 7 at the time. And every single night I went to bed and all I could see is, like, failure. Like, you're a failure, you're a loser. Pack your stuff, go back home, find a job, and do something for your family. And I fought that for 11 months.
Wow.
And I thank God that I was given that gift of hesitation, to pause. Um, and when I went back to my home after 11 months, I just had that foundation that I felt comfortable in to continue. And 13 years later, I'm that dad. I'm
Wow.
that dad that they deserve.
Jeez. Amazing. It's the goosebumps, buddy. I gotta tell you, and now you're here, and now you are
Yeah.
bringing this message. How many people and kids and schools and organizations do you speak to a year now?
I do about 200. I was doing
Jeez.
about 250 a year.
Uh-huh.
Um, I kind of slowed it down. I
That's
took
hard.
one day off, and I'm at about 200 events a year. I love it, right? I love kids. I love being in front of kids. I love the messaging that I've changed over the years. I think, when it comes to this topic, we talk about the worst day and we forget the first day.
Mm,
When it comes to our children, we want to remind them of the Chris Herrens and the Dow Strawberries that had everything
mm-hmm,
and lost it.
mm-hmm,
Instead of sitting them down and making them aware of what Chris Herren was like when he was 12,
mm,
and what did he look like and what did his family look like when he was 15? Um, because the first day matters.
mm,
And that's the scariest thing about drug addiction. Nobody knows who's going to suffer from it.
right.
I mean, I have people that come through this center and, they have 6 brothers and sisters, and 5 of them are super successful and happy. And then the one, is struggling,
Mm-hmm,
and they just happen to be the one.
right.
And so, you know, I'm unbelievably blessed. I work really hard at this. I love
Mm-hmm.
it. I love being out there in front of people, and just getting a chance, right, to be part of the solution, to kind of change the narrative, and the stigma that's been attached to this
I'm
illness.
sure you've had 1,000 stories. I mean, what are some of the experiences you've had with feedback with talking to gymnasiums full of kids and sharing your story because it's so transparent. You're so good at communicating it. You had a lot of things the kids are wanting, and then
Yeah.
what kind of feedback have you gotten from these young people?
My goal when I walk into a gymnasium or an auditorium, I want them to forget that I played for the Boston Celtics.
Mm,
That's my goal. I want them to forget who I was and to start thinking who they are,
mm,
right? I want kids to get off those bleachers, walk down those steps, and really kind of self-reflect on who they are and the kid they're becoming. And, you know, as I ask them if their mom or dad, their little brother or sister, or their grandparents could take a peek into their life, who they really were, not who they pretend to be around them. Um, and that self-reflection, it gets kids thinking.
right.
And that early intervention with children is critical. Like we're so good at challenging our kids athletically
Mm-hmm.
and academically, right? It's like mom and dad will sit with you and do homework with you every single night. We'll email your teacher, we'll call your coach, we'll get you one-on-one training, we'll do it all for you. But on Fridays and Saturday nights, you're on your own, kiddo. Like whether you feel good or not, the weekend, it's up to you to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't give our kids enough of that social and emotional support when I believe they need us most.
Mm, mm. That's immense. Great stuff. Let me ask you a question that comes to my mind.
Hmm.
If and again, you have the Heron Project, your foundation that's doing remarkable work. You have the facilities right there where you're
Hmm.
talking from today. We actually help people physically. What? And I know it's a huge question, but let's say someone has a family member who's experiment with drugs or who's starting to get down the path or they're way down the path. What advice would you have for the family? What encouragement would you give them?
I think everybody, whether it's my family or someone else's family, I think the process of the introduction or the education around addiction, is critical. And I think if anybody in your family is struggling with drugs or alcohol, I always err on the side of caution and push towards getting the help that's required,
Mm-hmm.
right? And who cares if they really don't need it, right?
Mm.
Thank God they don't. But what if they do? So, um, you know, gosh, I'm an athlete, I'm a competitor, and um, I believe that recovery has given me a competitive edge. I
Interesting.
believe it's made me better in all facets of my life. I believe when people are down and you know, going out and having a couple of pops, I'm not,
Mm.
and I think that it's given me this unbelievable edge, not only in my personal life, but my professional life.
Interesting.
And I think if I think it's to me, it's a very attractive way to live.
Yeah.
Um, I'm unbelievably blessed that I can go to a wedding with my wife and dance in front of people and not worry about what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The
And
freedom.
just be complete, the freedom to move and the confidence to not care
Mm.
and not worry. But you know, it's it's platforms like this and people like you who are bringing light to this and recognizing me, and I'm unbelievably grateful that you've done that.
Well, it's great stuff. And as we finish up here, I have 5 little questions that I ask everybody we've had, and it'll be a little different insight to Chris Herren. What I would say is, like I say, everyone I interview, I ask them what their favorite movie is. 90% of the time, they tell me it's The Shawshank Redemption.
Mm.
Chris Herren is The Shawshank Redemption to me. And what we're talking about now is, and in the movie, you spend a lot of time going through difficult times. He's got to crawl through a crappy pipe. But at the end of the day, it's Se Wantaneo, and it's that freedom.
Mm.
And, every success story has chapters of failure in it. And it's just yours were very public and on a
Mm-hmm.
subject that people don't want to talk about too much. And now God's using you in a mighty way, and you're a man who's full of gratitude, and you're changing people's lives every day, and it's you're an inspirational dude to me. And
Thank you.
so God bless you. Let's here's the 5 rapid questions if you're ready for me. Number 1, what's the single best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Open your mouth to save your ass.
who, who said that to you? Who told you that?
There was a 55-year-old woman who walked into this AA meeting every morning with a hard hat. And every morning she looked at me across and I just stared at my feet, right? I was defeated, and defeated people often, that they posture, they stare down at their feet.
Mm.
And she walked up to me one day and she said, you have to open your mouth to save your ass. And
Wow.
she followed it with, because I can never help you if I can't hear you.
Wow.
And that was the moment in my recovery where I started talking and telling it.
Mm.
So I credit her for giving me the ability to communicate,
It's God sent you an angel and a hard hat in an AA meeting. How about that?
Totally.
All right. What one talent or gift do you wish you possessed that you currently don't?
Talent or gift? Well, I wish I could show my youngest how good I was in basketball back in the day.
Because now it's just glory day stories.
Yeah. Now it's just film.
There aren't enough videos. They didn't show the 2,000 points when you were in high school.
Yeah. I wish I could jump like I used
to. What book has been most instrumental in your life?
So the book that's been most instrumental in my life, I mean, oh gosh, so you put me on the spot here, right? I would say the book, and this is going to sound terribly egotistical, right? But a guy wrote a book about me when I was a kid, and that book was called Forever Dreams. And the reason that book has been the most instrumental part of my life or impactful is because the relationship that I have with the author. Bill Reynolds, who wrote the book, he served every purpose in my life, from friend to author to uncle to father It's a brother. And if it wasn't for that book, I would have never met him. And it's the relationship that I've had with him since I've been 15 years old that has had probably the greatest impact on me.
That was called Fall River what?
Fall River Dreams.
Fall River Dreams. Wow. Long before Hoop Dreams, there was Fall River Dreams,
Totally.
right? Amazing. What one movie do you watch over and over again if you're flicking through the channels? You always stop when it's on.
All right, so I like Silver Linings Playbook.
Aha.
Right? I like Silver Linings Playbook. I'm a Life is Beautiful guy. Old. Cinema Paradiso is another old school movie. My dad, who suffers from alcoholism, and is extremely sick right now because of it. Many nights he came in with Chinese food and beer on his breath and woke me up to make me watch Cool Hand Luke.
Oh,
so a lot of Cool Hand Luke memories.
Yeah. Oh wow, that was my movie growing up. My mother, as you know, you raised Catholic. If you take your confirmation name, and I wanted my confirmation name to be Luke. And my mother goes, you're supposed to be named after a saint, not that bloody Paul Newman movie.
That's great. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's, I like that movie because at the end of the day, he ends up having to make his peace with God himself. So it's good stuff.
No doubt. Yeah.
Number 5. In the past, we've asked people about bucket lists and things like that. I'd like to ask you a different question. For you today, what is a good life? When you hear the phrase a good life, what does a good life mean to Chris Herren today?
So, I'm only going to repeat this, right? Because it really impacted me. I was watching a movie, a documentary 2 nights ago, and the guy in the documentary said, our whole life, our whole childhood, we pray to be the superhero. And as we get older, we realize we'll never be the superhero. We just pray not to be the villain. And, for someone like me, that hit me, because my addiction, I could easily become the villain,
right?
And be the villain. But it spoke to me, man. Like, I just don't want to be the villain.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing today, my kids' eyes smile because of sobriety. I see the smile in their eyes because of my sobriety, and I never want to lose that. And my life is measured up to how they look at me, and how much comfort they have with me. So as long as I'm granted another day sober, that's the good life.
Attaboy. Well, let me say this. You did start out pursuing the superhero life, and a lot of people do. In the basketball world, you were the superhero of Fall River. You were the superhero of your high school, superhero of Boston College and Fresno, and all these things, and what people wanted for you at the Celtics and so on and so forth. There is no doubt you had periods of life where you were the villain. And you had to go to layaway school for 11 months, villain school.
Totally.
But in my book today, you are the superhero. And this is a story that needs to get pounded. You're out there for 13 years, and you've made your life a life of service, serving your God, serving your wife, serving your kids, and serving communities and young people all over the country and all over the world. And it's just an honor to know you. I am so inspired by your story. I know it's a hard story, but that's why it's inspirational. And I think you have a message that's very needed. With the number of people that, 1.4 million people in the U.S. alone attempted suicide last year. It's like the city of Philadelphia attempted suicide last year. We have more people with,
That's
increased...
documented, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the documented.
It's one
right?
point. Yeah, we don't know the ones that didn't say anything about to anybody, right?
Right.
And we talk about a fella from New England, Henry David Thoreau, said most people are living quiet lives of desperation. And here you are having the courage to share your story, share your struggles, and now share your triumph. And you know what? I think people want that good life. And it's one day at a time. to be able to be of service to your fellow man, to be able to be in a relationship where someone can count on you, to be able to be a father to your kids, and to able to do meaningful work where you're giving back. This is what it looks like. And so for me, you're a superhero in my book, pal, and I want to tell you how much we appreciate you being here today. This message is going to reach an awful lot of people. So imagine you spoke to 10,000 gyms today. And
beautiful.
I know it's going to help somebody. I know it's going to love on somebody, and we really appreciate you. Thanks for being with us on the show today. God bless you.
God bless you as well, man. I can't wait to cross paths in person.
God bless you, pal. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
We'll see you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that today. It was inspirational. It was a lot to take in. If you have any interest, you can find out about the Herren Project. That's Herren, Chris Herren. And check out his 30 for 30 Unguarded. Like I told him, my ma has a few phrases. We're going to leave him with one today as she leaves us with a little Irish blessing. God bless you all. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this interview.
May the road rise up to meet you, and may the wind always be at your back. May the rain fall soft upon your fields, and the sun shine warm upon your face. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of his hand. See you next time.